Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In today's video, we're going to be discussing Harry Potter and some of the unpopular opinions floating around the internet regarding the franchise. Harry Potter casts a wide net and is approachable to all sorts of different people in many walks of life. It's great that the story is accessible and magical to so many, but what comes with such a diverse group of fans is a lot of differing opinions. In today's video, I'm going to be selecting 15 unpopular Harry Potter opinions from the internet and sharing them with you all. 15. Quidditch gameplay. Quidditch is a wizarding sport played on broomsticks, wherein players try to score more points than the opposing team. The game is played by two teams of 7 people, 3 chasers, 2 beaters, 1 keeper and 1 seeker, and involves 4 balls, a quaffle, 2 bludgers, and a golden snitch. However, despite the game's popularity inside and outside of the magical world, many have questioned the game's scoring system, including one Reddit user. What is the point of a sport where people are playing for a point here and there, but then one player grabs a ball, scores 1,000,000 points, and ends the game? Of course, catching the snitch is not technically an instant win, it only strongly suggests a win, as catching it results in 150 points. 14. The books have too many adverbs. For those unaware, an adverb is a word that modifies a verb, an adjective, another adverb, or even a whole sentence. Adverbs often end in ly, but some look exactly the same as their adjective counterparts. The criticism floating around the internet here is that Rowling simply filled her books with too many of these adverbs, perhaps running the risk of being overly descriptive. I certainly don't agree with this one, as I for one am a fan of descriptive texts. Particularly as when the books were first released, we didn't have the visual aid of the films, causing us to instead rely on our imaginations. 13. Hermione should have ended up with Victor Krum. This is a weird one. As we know, Hermione ends up going to the Yule Ball with Victor Krum, Durmstrang student and Triwizard Tournament contestant. The unpopular opinion voiced here is that Hermione should have actually ended up with Victor Krum instead of Ron. This one, to me, makes absolutely no sense. I mean, Hermione spent the entire Yule Ball trying to get him to pronounce her name correctly, for goodness sake. 12. The movies are better than the books. This one's going to rustle a lot of feathers, and just remember that this is not my opinion, but the unpopular opinion of a select few on the internet. One Reddit user said the following: "I know they removed things that were in the books, changed some plots, blah blah blah, but when you take the books on their own and the movies on their own, the movies are just better." Some people aren't big readers, they simply prefer to watch films, and I think that they are certainly entitled to their opinion. However, what the films did is condense the rich details and plot points of the books, which meant that a lot of things were left out. I love both, just in different ways. 11. Half-Blood Prince is the best movie. If you ask most Harry Potter fans what they thought of the films and which film was their favourite, you'll very rarely get a response back that says Half-Blood Prince. However, not everyone feels that way, and some have taken to the internet to openly express their openness towards the Half-Blood Prince, just maybe not for the reasons you expected. My favourite Harry Potter movie is Half-Blood Prince. It's a terrible adaptation, but I think it's filled with so much teenager drama, it's actually funny and has so many memorable moments. I can't say I shared the same opinion, however, I still enjoyed the movie, just not as much as some of the others. 10. Neville should have been the chosen one. As we know, Harry Potter, the boy who lived, is the chosen one. He was the one born as the 7th month dies, with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. However, some feel that Neville, who was also born at the end of July, would have been a better chosen one. Neville is better than Harry. Neville is more caring, courageous, and dependable. Harry did a lot of the legwork because he was labelled the Chosen One, but Neville was the one who destroyed the final Horcrux in the end, allowing Voldemort to be killed. Neville's a great character, but I think he was perfect right where he was. 9. The Goblet of Fire is irrelevant. This is certainly an interesting one, particularly as the Goblet of Fire is one of the longer Harry Potter books, though not the longest. The argument here is that the Goblet of Fire could be nearly entirely eliminated from the franchise, and not much would change. One internet goer said the following: "Book, film number 4 was irrelevant, and can be skipped on rereads and rewatches without being confused." However, others were quick to point out that the Goblet of Fire shows how Voldemort came back to life, which is a rather integral plot point. 8. The Philosopher's Stone is the worst movie. Now, I take this one personally, particularly as The Philosopher's Stone is one of my favourite films. The opinion in question here suggests that the first installment of the film franchise was fundamentally weak, and that every other installment afterwards was an improvement. However, the first film's faithfulness to the events of the novel, paired with the immense levels of childhood nostalgia, makes it one of my favourites. 7. The epilogue was good. Ending a massive story that has taken place over so many years is no easy feat, and while I was left a little unsatisfied with the story's epilogue, I didn't think that it was the worst thing in the world. I think I was more so just distraught that the story was coming to an end. However, the unpopular opinion here is that the epilogue wasn't just not bad, it was good. I certainly don't agree with this one, but I also don't think that the epilogue was a total flop, which many do. 6. Dumbledore was manipulative. Dumbledore was the beloved Hogwarts headmaster of our childhoods, and he was the same headmaster that took a killing blow from Snape atop the astronomy tower, bringing a tear to many fans' eyes. However, not everyone was upset about Dumbledore's demise. In fact, some fans think that Dumbledore was actually an extremely manipulative person who didn't truly care about anyone else in the story. This is reinforced by a statement expressing that Dumbledore put those that he was close to in danger, all in the name of the greater good. This is a tricky one, and I can certainly see how some would look at Dumbledore through this lens. However, at the end of the day, I think he's great. 5. The Time Turner was a cheap plot device. The Time Turner was a magical device used for time travel that appeared in the Harry Potter series, notably being used by Hermione in the 93-94 school year. The Time Turner allowed Hermione to take extra classes that her schedule would not otherwise allow, and this eventually resulted in an extremely stressed out Hermione. However, the Time Turner is also later used when Harry saves Sirius Black from the Dementors. Facing imminent death, it looked like Sirius was done for, but thanks to a tip from Dumbledore, Harry ended up using the Time Turner and saving him. Some fans argue that this was a cheap and easy plot device, and that this whole saving Sirius thing should have perhaps been approached differently, more elaborately. 4. Harry's kids' names. In the epilogue, we see Harry sending his children off to Hogwarts, and a familiar scene at platform 9 3/4. There are a lot of familiar things in this scene, and this includes the names of Harry's children, James Sirius, Lily Luna, and most notably, Albus Severus. Though the Potterverse is a little conflicted on the intentions of Snape and Dumbledore over the course of the books and films, I think that Harry honouring them by naming his son after them was meant to paint them in a positive light. However, one opinion floating around the internet is that they were undeserving of this honour, and that Harry should have instead named his son after people who were always there for him, people like Hagrid, Remus, or even Arthur Weasley. 3. Voldemort had the saddest backstory. Voldemort isn't the type of character that's meant to be given sympathy. He's a psychopath, a murderer, and the primary antagonist in the story. He makes everyone's life harder, and his very presence threatens the sanctity of the wizarding world. Most people truly don't care about Voldemort and his feelings, or rather, lack of feelings, but one interesting opinion floating around the internet is that Voldemort had the saddest backstory of them all. Abandoned at an orphanage by a mother who died shortly thereafter, Voldemort certainly had a rough start. The stance here is that Voldemort's actions were, though inexcusable and heinous, rooted in hurt and tragedy, rather than pure evil. 2. Draco Malfoy deserved better. Draco Malfoy was a pure-blood British wizard that hailed from the Malfoy family. More importantly, he was a Slytherin student at Hogwarts and, essentially, Harry's rival. Draco makes a poor first impression in both the books and films, and he's portrayed as the quintessential bully. As the books develop, Draco gets darker and darker, struggling with the immense pressure placed on him by his family and the Death Eaters. By the time the books, films end, Draco isn't painted as evil anymore, but he also didn't really get a redemption arc. The argument here is that Draco Malfoy became the person that he was because he was a product of his environment, and that he had no choice. And what this means from an opinion standpoint is that Draco simply deserved better. and I think that's a fair opinion. Number 1. Michael Gambon was better than Richard Harris. If you didn't know already, 2 actors played Dumbledore. First Richard Harris, who played him in the first 2 films, and later Michael Gambon, who picked up the rest of the films after Harris died. The argument here is that Gambon was a better Dumbledore than Harris, and though this is quite a divisive topic, I think that a majority of people prefer Harris, as he is generally considered to be a closer representation of what is depicted in the books. However, evidently, not everyone shares this opinion, and some have expressed their support for Gambon in the role, explaining that they could never have imagined Harris in the more action-packed sequences. I for one like them both, just in different ways. And that's it for this video. Remember, these are not my opinions, these are just some of the opinions of the internet. What do you guys think? Do any of these have merit? Which do you agree with? Which do you not agree with? Comment down below. Until next time, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.